on this episode of Clear the Air.
And one time I asked him, I said, why do you come and watch swimming? Swimming is so boring. Like, I even tell my mom and dad not to come and watch. I don't even watch my own team member. It's so boring. If the state is saving $1,000 a year per kid on healthcare costs, wouldn't it make sense for the state to cover the cost to buy $25 worth of gum to save $1,000? And she just said, well, I don't think we're going to move forward with this.
She mentioned, those who nose breathe, the nasal breathe, they get 18% more oxygen into their blood while they're sleeping than those who mouth breathe.
Hello, my name's Nate Jones. Welcome to Clear the Air podcast, and I'm here with my co-host today, Joel Melton.
Hey, everybody. And
the Olympics are coming. They were talking on the news the other day about how they were having the time trials and how Simone Biles was back in the Olympics, which I'm happy to see. They're here.
Yeah, it's pretty exciting. It's in Paris this year, and so it'll be exciting to see everyone making it over there, the time trials, and all those who are making the team. Pretty exciting time, and it'll be fun to watch. It starts this month.
And it's in Paris.
My
197th favorite city.
That's how it's ranked.
Yeah. Well, I might have to go back to Paris.
Yeah.
So with all this going on, we thought we'd have some Olympic-themed episodes, just so we can talk about the Olympics. And there is something about the Olympics that has a lot to do with oral and nasal hygiene. And so we're going to get into that. People being in peak physical condition. I mean, I'm not an athlete, but I try not to live in my glory days of when I was in high school. But I was an accomplished swimmer. I do have some gold medals from the state of Utah.
Hey.
I'm just saying.
They need to be on display somewhere.
I know they're in a drawer somewhere buried. I try not to live in my glory days, and those days are way behind me, as you can see. I am not in peak physical condition. But there are some things about athletes in their peak physical condition that I would like to get into today before we talk about our enjoyment of sports. So, what is your favorite sport, Joel?
My favorite sport in the Olympics?
Yeah,
it's definitely track. I love watching the runners in track.
Why do you like watching runners in track? That doesn't seem, that doesn't seem exciting.
It's exciting because it's short and it captures my attention.
Oh, I was thinking the 10,000-meter run. That's not very short.
Yeah, that's not. I'm talking about the 100, the 200, the hurdles,
okay.
All of that quick stuff.
Okay.
I like that, and I also like the swimming. That's are the short races. Well, I like the longer races, actually.
Did you just say you like swimming?
Yeah.
I don't know if you knew this, but I swam in high school, and I thought it was really weird because this guy from my church group, he would always ask when our swim meets were, and he would come down and watch. And one time I asked him, I said, why do you come and watch swimming? Swimming is so boring. Like, I even tell my mom and dad not to come and watch. I don't even watch my own team member. It's so boring. I mean, the only thing more boring than watching people swim is swimming itself. But I did it because I was good at it.
Well, I agree.
And I've never really been able to get into watching other people do sports. Like, I enjoy watching a football game or a baseball game if I'm there in the stadium. I enjoy watching the Jazz. We're in Utah, so I enjoy watching the Utah Jazz. I go to a lot of their games, but I'll watch 1 or 2 games on TV a year. But when the Winter Olympics were here in Utah, I went to a number of the events, and we all laugh about curling. Where they're taking the little stones and everybody's brushing, But to be honest, I went to that, and that was actually kind of fun to watch in real life. And when I looked at it on TV, even today, I'm like, this has got to be the dumbest sport in the world. But it is fun, and I can totally see how people get into it. But it is, I like them. I like to watch them live. So I don't know that I can really say that I have a favorite sport that I want to watch in the Summer Olympics because I'm not there. Maybe I'll have to go over to my 197th favorite city and see if I can get some tickets to go watch some of these sporting events.
Yeah, I agree. In person is definitely better in those, but track is really difficult. I watched my kids through high school, and they were great athletes, but it was difficult to stay there the entire meet for them to do something at the beginning and wait till the very end because they're spread their events across. And so I think the exciting thing about the Olympics is that you don't have to sit there and watch the whole thing, but they kind of key in on the exciting races and watch that.
So that gets us into one of the topics on here. When your kids were in high school doing this, that was before you knew anything about this company and xylitol. So tell me about how your kids, without breaking any HIPAA laws, of course, tell me about how your kids' oral health and their incidence of cavities, while they were doing those and participating in those sports.
Well, I think it was like any normal kids. They tried to watch their diet, but they were brushing just twice a day and flossing as often as they could. Most of them had braces on, so it was just brushing. There wasn't any other consideration or care for oral care, just that brushing would be enough.
Were they getting cavities?
Yes.
Shame on you.
I know.
Shame on you.
I know. If I only knew better.
I know. No. It's not your fault. Well, actually, it kind of is. You should have done a little more investigating. But that's where we were going today. And what we wanted to point out is that there was a paper. You would think that athletes, as much time and energy as they're putting into getting to that peak performance where they can perform on the world stage at that level, that they would be doing everything they could to be healthy. And in 2012, the Olympics were in London, and they actually did some research there, which was interesting. And I'm going to read it right now, so if it looks like I'm reading, that's why. And this is the results from this study, okay? First of all, the method, it was a cross-sectional study at the dental clinic within the polyclinic in the athlete's village. Following informed consent, a standardized history, clinical examination, and brief questionnaire were conducted. Of the results, there were 302 athletes from 25 sports were recruited with data available for 278 athletes. The majority of athletes were from Africa, the Americas, and Europe. So for the most part, a lot of developed countries in there where you would think you had higher standard of oral care. Overall, the results demonstrated high levels of poor oral health, including dental caries. 55% of the athletes had active dental caries. That is crazy, okay? Dental erosion, 45% of the athletes. Periodontal disease and gingivitis, 76% of the athletes. Periodontitis, 15% of the athletes. More than 40% of athletes were bothered by their oral health, with 28% an impact on quality of life. Okay, so more than 1 in 4 were reporting that it had a negative impact on quality of life. And 18%, it had an impact on training and performance. So nearly 20%, 1 in 5 of these athletes at the London Olympics were complaining that their oral care, their oral hygiene, was negatively affecting their ability to train and perform. Nearly half of the participants had not undergone a dental examination or hygiene care in the previous year. I'm making the assumption that the hygiene care in the previous year is an actual visit to a dental hygienist and not what I would consider hygiene care, which is brushing your teeth, flossing, and utilizing xylitol to maintain a healthy microbiome in your mouth. But anyways, that's pretty crazy. Those are some pretty absurd numbers for people, especially people who are supposedly being trained by the best trainers and working to perform better. Again, 1 in 5 said it was negatively affecting their ability to train and perform. What do you think of that?
Well, I think it's like a lot of things. If it doesn't hurt, they don't go figure it out. They don't wonder why they may have cavities, but they're not painful yet. I think it's terrible to think that that's really the reality of these elite athletes, and they're not paying attention to that. You introduced me probably after I first started here a couple of years ago of the 2000 oral health report from the U.S. Surgeon General. And
yes.
One of the key statements from that report was oral health leads to good overall health. So it baffles me that training like that, they wouldn't have made that part of their focus in oral health.
I would agree with that, but in 2000, you bring up a good thing. In 2000, the Surgeon General of the United States actually wrote a report, and to me, the failure of public health in the last quarter of a century to follow up on that with any action, any action, is one of the biggest failures of our public health, almost bordering on criminal neglect within our public health agencies. Because in 2000, they pointed out that the state of oral care was declining, sharply declining, and something needed to be done to address it. Me and the company that I started in 2000, we actually sent the government a whole bunch of data and information on xylitol and the studies that were done in Belize by the University of Michigan, where they showed that just chewing gum, a couple pieces of gum a day, 3 pieces of gum a day, one in the morning when the kids got to school, one after lunch, and one before they went home, reduced tooth decay to practically nothing and reduced respiratory infections by 40%. There has, to this date, a quarter of a century later, or a third of a century later from when the studies were done, there has not been a single gum chewing program implemented in the United States. During COVID, we offered to give the gum here in the state of Utah to a number of schools, and the public health department flat out turned us down, which I find incredibly absurd. And it was really crazy. I mean, we're getting way off on a tangent here, but it was absurd to the point that I actually wrote a letter to the governor and pointed this out. But I was on the phone, and I had a couple of dental professionals on the phone with me. One of them had been a professor at Northwestern University, where he was teaching in pediatric dentistry, and he's now retired. So that tells you he'd been there for a long time. So I would consider him an expert. The lady from the Utah Department of Public Health, where we were offering to give them gum, they could go put it and hand it out in some of the schools where they're spending the most money on oral care issues. And at the end of a year, you would be able to see whether it works or not. And her answer, this has got to be the dumbest. There's other words that aren't politically correct that I could use, but this has absolutely got to be one of the dumbest, inhumane things I've heard a person in public health say, because the studies are there showing that it's going to reduce tooth decay, and we're talking about children who are living in, let's say, underprivileged households where their parents can't afford, or they're not taking care of them, and they have massive tooth decay. They have tooth decay to where it's affecting their ability to concentrate in school. And these people in public health, when we discussed it, they said, yeah, we know about xylitol, we know what it does. And their answer was why they don't do it is because they said, okay, so if you give us the gum, okay, right now they're spending, in fact, I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head because I wasn't prepared to talk about this today, but they're spending about $1,200 a year per child, the state is, on taking care of these kids. And so we went in there and I said, we will donate the gum for a year, and whatever gum you need, we'll donate it free of cost, whatever. Then you can come back and say it works or it doesn't work. And we said, the cost to do this in product is going to be about $25 a year per kid. So if you can take $25 a year per kid and reduce respiratory infections by 40% and reduce tooth decay to practically zero, you're going to save $1,000, okay, per kid. You're going to save 90% of what you're spending on each kid. And this lady looked at us and she said, so if the program works, who's going to pay for it the second year? And I about fell out of my chair. I said, well, if the state is saving $1,000 a year per kid on health care costs, wouldn't it make sense for the state to cover the cost to buy $25 worth of gum to save $1,000? And she just said, well, I don't think we're going to move forward with this. I think that we want to keep our money so that we can pay the doctors and the dentists to come in so that all of these children can have equal access to see a dentist and a doctor when they're sick and need help. Mm. And that just boggled my mind. Yeah,
so it turned into a math problem. She couldn't quite equate that you were telling her she was going to save $1,000 by going this.
I don't think it was a math problem. I think it was an empathy problem. I think it was a humanitarian. I think it was
systemic. I mean, she just realized they could go to the doctor and get fixed for whatever they let go wrong.
No, I think it was more of she didn't care about the kids. Mm. I mean, and that to me is the bigger problem. But getting back to the athletes, I want to talk about why you would think. I mean, most people would think that these athletes were not or would have good oral hygiene. And so I want to discuss some of the reasons why they do have improved or higher levels of tooth decay.
Yeah, because I think the interesting thing with this study was that they were very careful to show that they were taking care of their teeth in what we consider a good oral care. There was a large percentage, over 90%, that were brushing their teeth twice daily.
Yep.
And then there was a large percent that were flossing.
Yep.
And so there was some other element that was causing that, because most people think that that's enough oral care.
Correct. But where it comes down to is there's two things that athletes do that a lot of other people don't do. One of it is when they're training, they breathe through their mouth. And when you breathe through your mouth, you're going to create dry mouth. It's just the way it is because you're drying out your mouth. And the other one is you're eating a lot more carbohydrates, which carbohydrates are actually what feed the bacteria in your mouth that cause tooth decay. Those are two huge contributing factors to the increase in bad oral hygiene, incidence of tooth decay. And one of the things that we'll touch on for just a minute here is that we know that using a nasal spray like Clear actually helps improve your oral hygiene because it opens your airway so that you can breathe through your nose a lot better. So you're not forced to mouth breathe as much. And I can't remember which magazine it was, but one of the things that's becoming, I'm not going to say common yet, is you have athletes that are taping their mouth shut while they're out there performing. And, this started, I want to say 15, 20 years ago with myofunctional therapy practitioners actually taping the mouths of their patients shut so that they could retrain their brain to make them breathe through your nose. And the reason why you want to breathe through your nose and why it's important to breathe through your nose even when you're running and performing is because when you breathe through your nose, you get more oxygen into your blood than you do when you're breathing through your mouth. The oxygen is actually forced into your blood when you're breathing out because you're breathing out and that creates a back pressure in your lungs. So it's actually pushing back as it's pushing out your nose. It's pushing back into the blood. It's pushing the air into the blood out of from the lungs. So that's why it's important. So it's mouth breathing and a lot more carbohydrates. So it makes sense why it's happening. And, what are the things that we can do, that athletes can do? Because obviously I'm not an athlete any longer. I mean, my idea of being an athlete now is, I get up and I walk 4, 5, 6, a couple times a week, 8 miles a day on a treadmill while I watch the news and get caught up and ready to go for the day. But just because I walk doesn't mean I'm an athlete.
Yes, it does. You're a walking athlete. I think that we're going to make that Olympic sport here soon.
It already is.
Treadmill walking, though.
Oh, yeah.
While you're watching news. So that's the key here. I think we're watching these athletes, and they're brushing twice a day, but it's morning and night. And then they are flossing, which is good for gum health. But the problem is cavities happen throughout the day, and they're not doing anything between the time they brush at 6, 7, 8 o'clock in the morning, however early they're getting, and late at night before they go to bed.
Yeah. Well, that's one of the things that we keep trying to tell people is that cavities don't just happen twice a day. And one of the best things you can do to help with that is, A, make sure you're doing good oral hygiene. But during the day, utilize xylitol. When you feel the urge to have a snack or chew some gum, make sure you're getting one that's 100% xylitol.
Because what happens if it's not 100% xylitol? There's others that are out there that are using xylitol. I've noticed when I've looked at other gums, it says xylitol, and that's kind of a buzzword for sugar-free or healthy, but it's not 100% sweetened.
Well, it's a buzzword for healthy mouth. It's a buzzword for a healthy gut. It's a buzzword for a healthy heart. There's a lot of good things that xylitol does, but it does a lot to help keep our mouth healthy. And the reason why you want to make sure it's 100% xylitol, especially when it comes to oral health, the other sweeteners they use, which is usually sorbitol and mannitol and maltitol, those are the bulk sweeteners, and then they'll use other artificial sweeteners like aspartame or sucralose to give the intense sweetening. But the sorbitol, the karyogenic bacteria, and this is also a problem with, in my opinion, it's a problem with toothpaste. When you're using a toothpaste, make sure there's no sorbitol in it because it's a 6-carbon sugar. And the strep mutans bacteria that create the acid in our mouth that cause cavities, that bacteria eats it, it metabolizes it, lives on it, it thrives. It doesn't create the acid, and so that's considered a non-karyogenic sweetener, but it does feed the bacteria. And to put that into a perspective, if you were having a war and fighting a battle, do you sit there and feed the enemy before you go and fight them?
Right.
That's really in essence what we're doing.
Right. So the other alternatives there, aside from xylitol, because xylitol is a 5-carbon.
Yeah.
And it does not feed.
It does not feed the karyogenic bacteria. It does not feed the acid. It's not fermentable is really what it is. You can't make beer out of it. You can't make wine out of it. And the bacteria can't make acid out of it.
So if you're brewing, don't use xylitol.
That is correct.
Yeah. Good. Yeah, I think that's really interesting as you see the athletes here and what they're so high performance and so training. This element needs to be introduced in them, and I imagine there may be some, but in general, with this report from the London Olympics in 2012, just shows that it's not a consideration or it's low on the list of considerations. About like Paris is to you, 197th.
Yeah, actually, that's interesting. My daughter's been bugging me to take her to Paris because the last time she went to Paris, I mean, she's 13 now, but the last time she went to Paris, I think she was, actually, I could actually look it up. It was when the newspaper office was bombed.
Oh.
We were there driving from Paris to just up north from Paris, the other country. But we were driving up from Paris up to Belgium when that happened. And
wow.
And everybody called me and they're like, "Oh, are you okay?" I'm like, I'm on my way to Egypt. And I've been to Egypt many times. I've never been there when there was a bombing or a terrorist attack. I've been to Paris like 3 times, and every time I go there's something wrong.
Going on.
Yeah.
So if we think about this in terms of the athlete's perspective, and you mentioned xylitol in their regiment. So xylitol it does not feed the strep mutans. But what else does it do? As far as the tissue and moisture to help keep the mouth?
Well, so xylitol is hydrophilic, and what that means is it's going to pull moisture toward it. And so if you go down to the store and you find dry mouth products, the vast majority of them, and especially the good ones, are going to have high levels of xylitol in it, because if you're using a dry mouth product, you're acknowledging that you have dry mouth, and the xylitol is going to keep it moist. It's going to help reduce the incidence of tooth decay. And if I was an athlete training, or if, I know anybody that's an athlete training for the Olympics or something like that, I would highly advise them to keep some xylitol gum, spry, by the way, spry. Actually, any xylitol gum would be great as long as it's 100% xylitol, but keep whatever you can find and use it after you eat your carbohydrates, because you do need the carbohydrates for the energy while you're training. But after you eat the carbohydrates, make sure that you clean those carbohydrates out of your mouth with some gum. It's pretty simple to do. We have a bunch of athletes that actually use our products when they're training because of that.
Yeah, we sponsored some ultra marathoners. They ran an 800-mile race, and they were using our spry products and our clear products. Clear products prevention all the way up. They were trying to stay healthy, and then we also had them use it on the course. They were chewing the gum because they need to keep their mouth, just like you said. Eventually you're going to mouth breathe. It's ideal to nose breathe the whole time, but you're eventually going to mouth breathe just because of pure exhaustion.
They just need to train harder.
Yeah.
Put tape over their mouth.
Yes. Yeah. So that was the key, is they got to introduce that, some dry mouth or moisturizing spray to help with dry mouth, or the gum, so that the xylitol has that benefit. And I think that's great. One of the things that is interesting here, as you see the athletes and they're doing this, I wonder what it would take to have them be introduced to this and then put it in their regimen. It seems like most of them are pretty regimented in their daily activities. They're getting up at a certain time. They're doing certain things. It would seem like something like this would be, putting xylitol in their use would be easy to do.
I think it would be.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm not training for the Olympics. I probably should, but I'm not. I'm past that prime age, until my next life.
Yeah.
So
I think it would be great. So the other thing is, with mouth breathing, you talked about some of them taping their mouth. I think this, even with the athletes as well, a lot of people end up mouth breathing when they sleep. And you mentioned the myotherapy. And I think a while back we had Tricia O'Hare in here, and we had a conversation with her. She mentioned, those who nose breathe, the nasal breathe, they get 18% more oxygen into their blood while they're sleeping than those who mouth breathe.
correct. I learned about that, I want to say 15, 16 years ago. I started taping my mouth shut. And it sounds really bizarre, but it really isn't that big of a deal. Just before you go to sleep, you put a piece of duct tape and wrap it around your head. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. It's not like that. It's just a little piece of tape, and you put it right here, and it keeps your mouth closed. But you do that, and you actually train so that, I mean, I don't want to get too graphic here, but when you're asleep, instead of sleeping like this, you sleep with your head turned down a little bit, because that encourages you to keep your mouth closed. You know, with my children, you know, I would go up and put them to bed, and I would go back up after they were asleep. This is when they were younger. But you would go in, and if they were sleeping with their mouth open, I would actually pinch their mouth shut until it stayed shut. And, you know, they breathe through their noses now.
Yeah. Yeah, I do. I actually started taping my mouth. I consider myself fairly claustrophobic at times, and so I panic the same thing. I use a mouth tape that just goes around the outside and holds the lips closed, but it doesn't go across the lips. I've tried the cross the lip tape, but it actually works, and it actually provides better sleep. And I wonder if that's something as well, just the whole mouth breathing, sleep and awake for these athletes, certainly contributing to some of their downfall and their terrible teeth.
I hadn't even thought about that, but you're right. If they're breathing through their mouth while they're sleeping, that's going to lead to more tooth decay also.
So we talked about the diet as well. You talked about carbohydrates as a contributor to the overall downfall of their oral care.
Correct.
And so with that, the carbohydrates, there's not much they can do. So we promote something called Spry 5. And Spry 5 is getting enough doses throughout the day. So you mentioned if they're taking that. So even if they're taking, you know, goos or other high energy, high carbohydrates, it's making sure that after they eat those, they're taking that. And they can take it more than 5 times a day. Yeah. It's just every time they introduce that to their mouth to get rid of feeding the strep mutans, they want to take xylitol, right?
Correct. And if you take 3,000 pieces of gum a day, you know, there's a paper that says it might hurt your heart, but yeah, up to 2,999.
It might be okay. Yes. So, but we recommend 1 to 2 pieces, right? You're getting 1 to 2 grams of xylitol.
1 to 2 pieces a couple times a day. And if you're using a xylitol toothpaste, I mean, the big thing is if you're using it on a regular basis, what we learn from all of the data and the studies is that what you're doing is you're actually changing the microbiome of bacteria in your mouth to bacteria that don't create acid. So even when you're eating, if you've changed that microbiome, if you get rid of the acidogenic, the bacteria that create acid out of your mouth, this is what the belly sugar study showed, is that even if you stop chewing xylitol gum at that point, you're still not going to get nearly as much tooth decay because you get rid of the bacteria. You've gotten rid of the infectious disease. I mean, you can see from this paper and from this data that even the dentists that are working with the Olympic athletes, they are continuing to look at tooth decay as a structural illness and not as a bacteria as the bacterial infection that it is. You know, and if they change their mind and start looking at it as a bacterial infection, how do you treat it? Well, you treat it by chewing xylitol.
Well, I think it's interesting, too. You know, there's obviously plenty of high-performance studies that happen when they put athletes on a treadmill and they put a mask on them to manage their O2 and watch their levels and everything. It would be interesting at some point to see either with nasal spray with xylitol and or gum in oral care and see what that does to a high-performance athlete at their highest level.
You know, I think I could probably get a doctor to do that. You know, they did a study, and this is something that talks about, you know, for athletes too. But they did a paper that was published a number of years ago, I want to say 2016, 2017, where they took people that came in. So these are not athletes, these are people that already have issues. But people that came into the clinic, they used ultrasound, they measured their airway volume, then they used clear, and then they waited 3 minutes and they measured it again. In just 3 minutes, their airway volume had improved by 20%. That's a huge amount. If you're an athlete, I'm not going to say it's going to improve by 20%, but even if improved by 10% or 5%, that's going to improve your ability to perform on the field or in the pool or on the ice rink, on the curling green. I don't know what they call it.
What about if you're playing cornhole? Will it help you there?
Well, only if you put your beer down. We had a comment earlier about cornhole being the best game to play in a bar because it's one of the few games that you can play without having to put your drink down. That and darts. We couldn't think of another one.
Yeah.
Even hatchet throwing, they tell you to put your drink down. But anyways, yeah, so I would actually like to see that's actually a paper that would be simple. That's a research project that would be simple to do. Remind me, and I'll reach out to the doctor that did it and see if they'd be willing to do one where not only do they use nasal spray, but they use xylitol gum. And the reason why I'm saying that would be important is there was some papers that came out a number of years ago where they pointed out that people who used mouthwashes, high alcohol, germicidal mouthwashes, the ones that say we kill 99.9% of the bacteria, that using those before going into workouts actually caused heart issues. And we understand the mechanism of action. We completely understand it because in your mouth you have these bacteria that are nitrate-reducing bacteria. The nitrates that you need, they help relax your blood vessels. If I'm correct, I think that's exactly what Viagra does. So before I go to the gym, I just no. Anyways, but we know what the method of action is, and so we know that you shouldn't use high alcohol or germicidal mouthwashes. So, but if you're a high performing athlete and you would use a mouthwash like that, you would think that it would cause you to underperform also. And so you want to use. I'm just spitballing here, so don't take me at my word for it. I'm not saying anything. I'm just thinking this through. But if you're using a mouthwash that is killing bacteria, it's going to make it so that you're not going to be able to perform as well as if you're using a mouthwash that was supporting those nitrate-reducing bacteria. That would actually be an interesting study.
Yeah.
Remind me about it. I'll draft something up and see if I can get somebody to do that. Who was it that came up with that? Was that me?
I think it was you. Yeah. I was just commenting on it.
No, it wasn't me. I don't come up with studies. I usually just, think of ways to do them.
So what do you know about oxidative stress?
Well, that oxidative stress is kind of what I was just going over, just in different words. So
Yeah.
Yeah.
So the oxidative stress that you're talking about is there's all things that happen and they lead to other things, and that's why I think it's interesting that they're not paying attention to oral health when we roll back to what the Surgeon General said in 2000, that good oral health leads to all other health, good health, and I think that that's complicated in some of these things because of claims that are made or things that people think happen, but they're not watching the other effects, like killing 99% of the bacteria.
Yeah. I mean, I can point this out again, but when we have the prevalent use of germicidal mouthwashes that kill 99.9% of the bacteria, one of the side effects of that is, well, I'll just point this out, that the bacteria that digest gluten, the gluten reducers, they live in our mouth. The lactobacillus that help us digest lactose, milk, they live in our mouth. So logic would tell you that if you're sitting there fighting a war and trying to kill all those off, you're going to start having a population that is gluten intolerant and lactose intolerant. I don't know if we're there, but every time I go into a menu or a restaurant, they're like, "Are you lactose intolerant? Are you gluten intolerant? Do you have peanut allergies?"
Yeah, and that's interesting. So it could stem back to their oral care or lack thereof, or whatever they're using to fight one thing, maybe killing something else off. So with this, now you're a trainer to these athletes in some way, right?
No, I'm not a trainer.
Well, let's pretend like you are.
Okay.
What do we tell these athletes, or what would we like either dental professionals or trainers to introduce to these athletes in terms of this?
I would tell them to find and make sure they find a holistic dentist that really understands some of this, because there's a lot of dentists out there that still don't understand the oral systemic connection, that what goes on in your mouth has a wide range of effects on your systemic health. There's a lot of dentists that still don't understand that using germicidal mouthwashes cause an increase in heart attacks. And so find a dentist that really understands that kind of, the outlook that oral care is I'm trying to think of how to say it. It's more than just killing all the bacteria and making sure that you don't have holes in your teeth. I mean, those are two of the things, but you want to make sure you're doing it right. But what I would advise people to do first off is, I say this all the time, drink more water. We don't drink enough water. Athletes don't drink enough water. I swam, and I never thought I would get thirsty, but I was always thirsty when I finished swimming. And I was always afraid to just gulp down the water in the pool because I thought there was too much pee in it. But the other thing is, make sure you're using xylitol gum. Make sure that you do go see the dentist, and use some xylitol gum after you eat your meals or your goo packs or whatever carbohydrate you're using when you're training. Unless you're playing cornhole, then you don't need any carbohydrates. And sports, another thing that people can do is these sports where they're using mouth guards, get some xylitol gel and just put some on the mouth guard. And when you put it in your mouth, that'll keep your mouth moist through the whole time you're training. So, those are just some of the simple things.
Yeah, so then it turns in, as you mentioned, to systemic health concerns, or at least the methods that they can do to build up. Well, I think that's some sage advice. Keep your mouth moist. So here's the thing. When the Olympics start, everyone watch and see how many runners, swimmers won't do it because they're underwater, but how many other people are running or doing their events with their mouth open, and see what their performance is.
Pay attention, because the ones that are performing the best will probably have their mouth closed. And if you don't trust me, don't believe me, go start just reading a couple articles before the Olympics and read a couple of these articles about the benefits of mouth breathing as opposed to nasal breathing, or nasal breathing as opposed to mouth breathing, and how it affects performance, and then start watching the athletes.
So, and one of the things that I think maybe I didn't realize or recognize, and I've been in and around dentistry for a little bit, is the protection that saliva. It's not just to moisturize your mouth, but there's protection in your saliva for your teeth. And that's why you want to keep your mouth moist. It helps to lower or keep the pH in balance, and it helps to protect as well. And so when you go to a full dry mouth, you're actually inviting or making your teeth more susceptible to cavities or other disease.
Yep, that is true.
So that's the key. Well, what else? Any other advice for these athletes coming up?
Win.
Do
your best.
Go USA.
Why do you always have to say go USA?
Because that's our team.
Oh.
I like to see other athletes perform, but
I want them all to do their best and let the best man win. So, Joel, before we finish up here, I'm just going to ask you one other question. Next time, the Olympics are going to be in L.A. They haven't been in L.A. since the 84?
Yep.
84.
84 was at the Coliseum. I had lived in L.A.
So when you went to the Olympics there, what did you want to do?
Pole vault.
So, I'm just saying.
Got time to slim down.
You got 3.5 years before, actually 4 years to get in shape.
And get my fighting weight.
Because I don't know that there's a pole that will.
I'll use a steel pole.
I'm just kidding. But I'm going to go and I'll try to train to do the swimming, and I know that I float. That's all I need. So, all right. Anyways, that's another episode of Clear the Air podcast, and thank you for listening or watching or whatever you're doing.
This episode of Clear the Air was hosted by Nate Jones, co-hosted by Joel Melton, produced by David Monk, associate producer Matthew Davis. Video and audio were edited by Caleb Scoresby. Research by Sabre Bills. Music by Augusto Diniz. If you enjoyed this episode of Clear the Air, be sure to follow, like, and subscribe so you don't miss out on the latest episode. Have a favorite episode? Share it with a friend. New episodes of Clear the Air are published weekly on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks for listening. We'll catch you next time.